Recording. All right. Let me see this get started. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to do a short webinar on suicide at work. And it's being brought to you by me, Johnny Lee. And just to let you know, I will be recording this, so I'll make that recording available to people afterwards. Also, you'll get a follow-up email with the resources that I talk about in this webinar, so you'll be getting that probably about an hour after the webinar. Click. A little about me, that's me. One thing is I'm pretty busy in, I spend way too much time actually in LinkedIn with conversations and discussions, so if you have a point that you want to discuss or something you disagree with or something you want to expand upon, we can keep emailing back and forth. We can have a phone conversation, but why don't we educate all people? There's several different groups in LinkedIn around workplace violence that we could continue that conversation there. Although you can contact me, there's my information down there. This is, more recent stuff, I guess the past 20 years or so, 10 or more. The work that I've been doing, but before that I worked in a lot of mental health related fields such as group homes or working with adjudicated youth, and so that's why I'm sort of familiar with some of some of the depression and issues that could pop up in the workplace. This is all being brought to you by the e-panic button. Stick around later and I'll do a little demo. Okay, if this is your first time with GoToMeeting, I'm not exactly sure what your console will look like because maybe you got an older version, but there should be this little tabby thing right there that you can expand out. And then if you really want to speak, you can raise your hand, but it's probably better just to use this questions tab. Just type your questions in there and I'll read them out. I won't say who you are. I'll just try to read the questions verbatim and answer it that way. And then also, if you wish to speak, say, hey, Johnny, unmute my mic, and then you've got the floor or the desktop, as it may be. I think this will be about 3/4 of an hour, about 45 minutes. Feel free to ask questions anytime. Of course, I'll pause and be like, does anyone have any questions? But really, I'm fine with questions occurring as they pop into your mind, and that makes for a much more interesting program, I believe. All right, what are we going to do? I'm going for a minimalist view also with my themes. This is very straightforward, kind of simple stuff. And I try to make that easy for doing handouts as well. I'll talk about statistics. What's the extent of suicide at work? Certainly a lot of that's going to be related to cases. I sure don't mean to do just war stories, but just to give some examples of these incidents are important to make it a little more real. And then I made my own little sort of attempt at a typology or the different types of suicide at work. By no means I'm not expecting anyone to adopt it or to be published or anything like that. Just a reference, a framework. That's all like typology is. It's just a framework for reference. And then most importantly, we'll talk about prevention, how organizationally what an employer or a manager can do about implementing programs and procedure. But to a degree, we'll also talk about the direct personal response because it comes down to a human being talking to another human being and what could be done there. However, by no means this is not a suicide prevention webinar, or I'm not qualified really to speak at that, so that's why I point you towards resources to get more information where you could get that expert level of attention. So that sound good? All right. Okay, so again, I'm just thinking about it, just some thoughts. I welcome any response. I think I said that I'm not an expert, and so I just want to make clear about that. But let's talk to you experts out there, those who are familiar. I'm just curious, when we talk about the rates of death and workplace violence, mass shootings, active shooter prevention, homeland security, so who's committing most of the murders at work? And now, here we get to have some interaction. I'm going to launch a poll. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, and then now you should see on your screen oh, where is it? Yeah, so you know what to do there. Just tap it, click one of those things that makes sense for you. Who do you think commits most of the occupational homicides? Oh, and this follows the OSHA sort of guidelines of workplace violence. Type 1 is robbery. Like someone has no business with the business, is coming in to rob it. It can refer to strangers as well for their own motives. Type 2 is customers and clients, those that you serve or work with. Type 3 is what people think of, coworker, ex-employees. And then type 4 is a personal relationship, like a family member or more likely a romantic relation that comes into the workplace, which can be combined also with coworkers. I mean, you could also have relations with coworkers and they go bad as well. All right, looks like a lot of people have voted, so I'm going to stop it soon. So if you're wavering, stop wavering and vote. Okay, because we're closing in just about 5 seconds. Okay, it's going bye-bye. Boom, and then now you want to know what people thought. Wow, it looks like most people thought it was coworkers and ex-employees, and that's a good guess. And then, of course, domestic violence is a huge issue, though no one thought it was the clients committing the homicides. And then some people recognize the strangers and robbers in there. So, by the way, it's not like, I'm grading you or anything. This is just also matters of perception. And the one point I want to make is we're talking about homicides, which is very different from assaults. When we look at simple assaults, battery, even aggravated assaults, those are going to have very different dynamics than homicide and the weapons that were used. But let's get on with it. All right, getting back to there. And there. Robbery, I did not put robbery on here, but robbery is off the chart, literally, meaning it's somewhere up in the 400, 500 category. I could look it up for you, but the point is the most of them are like fast food joints, convenience stores, grocery stores, those kind of places being robbed. And that really falls more into the crime sort of element. But here, I guess you could see the green line is the coworker, so most of y'all got that right, of the typical workplace violence. The blue line is domestic violence, and this data is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm sorry, I do have 2011's stats, but I didn't add in this chart, but they're comparable. There's no big swing, not like there's a big spike in any of these. But there you go. And just to point out that these figures are relatively low and somewhat stable. When we talk about the hundreds of millions of working American adults, we're talking 30, 40, 50, maybe 70 homicides, which of course are way too many, but just to demonstrate that it's other causes of death, car accidents, prostate cancer, I mean, that's congenital heart failure, that's what's killing most people at home and at work. Oh, there's a comment or a question. Having problem with sound. I'm sorry to hear that. Please let if anyone else knows they have problems with sound. I'm looking at my little microphone thing, and mine is good. Okay, it's fine now. Sorry about that. I'm not sure. Maybe I had to move my mic. Great. Thank you for letting me know. I want this to be a good experience for you all. Oh, very good. Thank you. People are saying in breath. So now here's the drum roll, right? This is what I really wanted to show you. These are suicides at work. And I'm sorry. I just had a conversation with an attorney, and we were talking about workplace violence and how horrible it is. And I was like, well, actually, and they were talking about guns at work, like guns kept in your car in the parking lot, and like, oh, some disgruntled employee is going to come in there and shoot their boss. And the thing I want to emphasize is, in many times, there were more suicides at work than there were coworker, clients, and domestic violence combined. So, look at 2005. Let's look at the last records. Yep, that's clearly 121, almost double. If you take all of the people killed by a coworker, by their ex-husband, by their disgruntled client, and you number all those people, then you times it by 2, it still doesn't equal the number of people who are committing suicide in the workplace. I should change that title up there, because really just to demonstrate that suicide is a much larger issue. So I guess the questions are why? Why do we not recognize this? And the one immediate question or answer I have is that it's simply not reported. When I was with the police department, I worked with all the all the homicides and suicides, and certainly when a homicide occurs, it gets a lot of attention, especially given the nature of the incident, but it certainly made the news. I can tell you there were so many suicides that were not even in the paper, let alone community news or the local TV station. The bottom line is I believe these suicides are occurring much more frequently. It's simply not covered the way we see the quote-unquote rampage shootings occur. Secondly, I believe there's also a stigma around it that's a sense of privacy, that when a homicide occurs, there's a villain involved, and so within these shows, there's a lot of attention on look how bad this guy is, and he's awful. But when the suicide is issue, there's almost a sense of respect about letting people to have their own issues, and they're not sure who the victim or who the perpetrator is. So I feel like I don't know if the media knows what to do with it, but there generally is a lot of silence around. Hey, yeah, I just made a statement there. You're all welcome to argue with me or throw in your views. I've got someone quote right here. Suicide of someone that works there or suicide of someone else doing it there. So with this stats, suicide of someone who works there or suicide of someone else doing it there, meaning like a client or a vagrant or someone just coming on to the work site to commit no, these are employees. So this is Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this is because they're tracking injury to employees. It's as a labor issue. So these are strictly employees. That's a great question. You're raising another point, that how many times does a client commit suicide in the workplace, or a husband? A husband goes to the workplace, stands in front of his wife, and he shoots himself. That I do not believe, I'm almost positive, has not been recorded within this data. So that's a great point. Specifically, I'm thinking of how many people throw themselves in front of the subway and trains in New York City. True. Or I worked with this great suicide prevention guy, and he did a lot of work around San Francisco Bay Bridge. That place is a magnet for suicide. It was amazing how many people commit suicide or previously attempted to at the San Francisco Bay Bridge. So great point. No, these figures do not include that. I cannot get audio with my laptop. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you can call in. I'm not sure. I'm guessing there might be an issue with your audio on the laptop. I'm glad you're able to call in. As people know, you can click on that little audio tab and you can choose to call in or use your microphone. So good. Thank you. I love the comments, and anything I said about why the media or people don't give attention to suicide. If you have your own thoughts about that, I'd be glad to share that as well. But moving on. Now, earlier, there's a great document that's really got me interested in this subject in the first place, was by, I don't even know if he's a doctor or not, but Stephen Pagula over at BLS published something back in 2004 that really caught my eye. And he really just demonstrated the extent of this issue. The single most comprehensive study, he looks at over 2,000 people who died at work, and that's a significant number compared to other things get more attention. This is Bureau of Labor Statistics Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries, and there's an average of 217 a year with very little deviation. Now, my guess is actually that it's increasing since that 2004 report, but that again, I'm just showing you the grand how much more common it is than other types of threats that we're concerned about. Oh, I'm going to have to do something that's fun. Okay, I know this is hopping off things, and I'm being distracted here, but it's free, guys, so what are you going to do, complain? You want your money back? What I want to know is schools, because I'm really kind of annoyed sometimes with, oh my goodness, some kid who listens to goth music is going to shoot us. But what I wanted to know was the extent within the school system. So this was okay, it's doing content preparation. This is looking at suicides, and I wanted to know in schools. So why don't I search, where's the search function? Let's do Control F. Education. All right, so within educational training and library occupations, wow, 3. So there were considered to be 3 in 2007, 2008. So again, I'm just wondering about the whole concern about school shootings, but I'm curious at how many of those shootings are actually people shooting themselves. Oh, and I know you want to know this, but that was the big leader, of course, protective services. I'll show this later. If anyone wants a copy of this document, please just hit me up, and I'll be glad to send it. But that's just, again, to show you that, where the rates really occur and are more common. Okay, some more details from that study in 2004. Again, men. Now, what I thought was interesting was that I believe, I'm not an expert in suicide, but male and female rates are somewhat similar for general suicide. If you look at all suicides at home, wherever, that women, it occurs frequently with women, but when it was at the job, it was vastly 94% more likely to be men. Older workers, without a doubt, I can see that. Self-employed, which is really unique concept. I'm going to talk about that, maybe how self-employed is an issue. Now, this totally flies in the face of you HR folks and EAP people trying to work with these businesses, because these self-employed small businesses maybe have they don't have their own policies, it's their own organizations. And then finally, it said agricultural workers as well. And then what do we see? Interestingly enough, of the positions, managers and administrators had a higher number of suicides compared to, let's say, frontline employees. In terms of the type of industries, and this is what I just showed a second ago, law enforcement is one that has the biggest risk, with the military being a close second. Now, I just want to put this out there. I'm not making any sort of political statement, but I just, it's just a fact. We need to look at these issues. That within the military, I have friends and family in the military, and I say, hey, keep your head down, duck, don't get blown up by an IED, all that stuff. Take care of yourself. But veterans and active service personnel are more likely to die from suicide than from combat-related injuries. So while we're all thinking about being shot by the Taliban or whatever, I won't say, but we're concerned with being shot by the combatant, the greater risk of death is from their own self, and that's a great tragedy within the armed forces. Now, this in itself, and I'm curious, I want to get some input. Later I'm going to talk about this internal locus, external locus of control concept. But we're seeing folks in law enforcement, military, self-employed, managers. What is this saying? Or can we say about men or about older workers? What is it why these characteristics possibly are correlated or causal? And I hope you all understand what I mean by that. Correlated or causal issues. We have some more comments here. Suicide is someone that, oh no, that was that one. Audio, any stats on professions for people? Yes, oh, hopefully you saw that. I don't want to waste any more people's time, but I've got that document. Any stats on professions for people that might not have easy access to firearms? Oh, so that's interesting. If your argument is saying that because in the military and because in law enforcement we have guns laying all, or they're not laying all over the place, but they're readily available, maybe that, by the availability of the weapons, makes them a higher risk. I see your point. If that's your point, I don't think that's it. But it's a good point. Actually, I just read this article here in Alabama. They made it legal for employees to carry firearms in your vehicle on your way to work. And the argument is, well, now these people can just run up to the cars and get it, and you're making it more available. I'm not maybe going with that one. The other point that's being made about the availability of weapons is also the previous weapon. So, of course, they know how to use the weapons. That's a good point. I mean, if you're a farmer, maybe you've got those weapons, you know how to use those tools. If you're a chemist or a biologist, then maybe you're going to use poison or some sort of virus to do it. But, military and law enforcement, you have the firearms around. That's why it could come in. That's a good point. Maybe that's sort of the issues. I'm sort of tending more towards personal issues about their character, and we'll talk about that. I'll mention that in a little bit. Okay, so there's another comment. I'm a writer for sure. That's Society of Human Resource Managers. Question regarding men committing suicide on the job. Women are statistically more likely to be depressed and suffer from mental illnesses. However, men commit suicide most often on the job. Why do you think this occurs? I'm not sure why men commit. Okay, the question, so women certainly do commit suicide without a doubt, and they suffer from depression, and they suffer from post-traumatic, and women are more likely to be impacted by post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a big common diagnosis. My theory is that one thing is that oh God, I can't wait for the comments to come. Men might be more likely to use a more final, definite solution, such as a gun. If I put a shotgun in my mouth and pull the trigger, and I'm sorry, if I get very graphic here, people, I apologize, but if I was to use a firearm, there's no walking back from that. There are people who do shoot themselves in the chest, or I believe it or not, you can shoot yourself in the head and still survive, but, good square shot to the temple, you're going to die. Women have been known to use less immediate lethal means, such as poison or slitting the wrist, which has a window of opportunity for protection. So one case, and this is when I used to do counseling work at Johns Hopkins, one case is where a woman or a teenager may choose to know their husband's coming home at 5:30, slit the wrist at 5:15, waiting to see if the person will catch them. And this is just one argument. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just proposing this as an argument. Then they get a chance to be rescued because it's, God, can I call it a attention-seeking behavior? That's a possibility. If I put a shotgun in my mouth, there's no walking back from that. There's no, maybe someone will rescue me. So that's one issue that I've got. It could be that men are more likely to commit suicide at work because more men work, and I don't know that. We could easily pull up that data. Are there more men in the workplace compared to women? I'm not sure. However, within those professions that I just mentioned, certainly they're more male-dominated. We can argue about administrators and managers, more men, and that's a separate issue. But certainly within law enforcement and military, there's more men. Oh, did I say that wrong? Oh, it's Society of Human Resource Management. Oh, I called it managers, didn't I? All right. Access to weapons. Oh, that's for SHRM. That's the title for SHRM. So, experience from weapons, experience in taking lives, possibly suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes, those are all great points about why possibly within these professions we have bigger issues. Okay. Golly, and I thought I was going to be short on this webinar. I thought I had to do a lot of fluff. So within that 2004 study, most of the firearms, again, demonstrating you don't walk away from a firearm shot in general compared to other types. The other most common issue was asphyxiation, most likely hangings that occur. So, that has some points there. And then, small degree poisoning and other toxics. I didn't see slashing. I didn't see, that's interesting. I got to go back at that study. I don't see stabbing or, what's it called? No, the BLS has a specific term for it, but basically like using a knife to cut yourself. Okay, this is Johnny's opinion. So, hey, you get to voice your opinions because I get to voice mine. One is I believe that there's a higher risk factor for the elderly, for an older generation. And I don't know what I meant by elderly. But with older folks, that there's issues that come into play that we have serious health-related issues. As you get older, you have more issues that occur. And again, going with that sort of self-employed manager, in control kind of guy, that this population might feel that they're losing a sense of control, and that's what they don't want to have occur. When I was doing direct services, yes, I worked with teenage suicide, and that was horrible. I mean, it's all bad, but teenage just seems like such a waste, such a huge mistake. When a young girl kills herself because, she's, well, I'm not minimizing it, but when it's due to being teased or losing a boyfriend, if I could, this might be an ageist comment, but, us older folks realize that, things will pass and things will get better and that, it's a temporary problem. When we got a 75-year-old man who's got prostate cancer, advanced degree, and he faces 3 months of chemo and 6 months in a inpatient intensive care unit and blowing his life savings, he'd rather see his grandson get like, a new Stingray Mustang, or you'd rather give the money to his kids, and I've seen that in suicide notes. I've read those, that state exactly why they killed themselves. Other issues, of course, we could talk about economic stagnation and decline, meaning people who lose their jobs or are about to lose their jobs or know about to be laid off, made to do, we all heard this phrase, you're made to do more with less, and it will, I believe, get worse also with, this is a political comment here, but with, I believe, the pending economic issues that we have coming around the corner. The other factor is, even though we've had veterans certainly returning to the workforce as the drawdowns have occurred, the more drawdowns occur, more veterans getting into the workforce, and veterans, as I mentioned, the number one cause of death for veterans is suicide, and there's huge issues around post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. That's another very important issue that people aren't so familiar with, is that the injuries that occur due to IED devices or getting hurt, we have great, well, when they get it, they have great protective gear and health care to help them, but the one damage that's not easy to address is traumatic brain injury, which has huge impacts on mental health and a high risk factor for suicide. So there's where I think we got some problems. Now, if I could jump in, I would just want to talk about suicide at work in terms of like some trends or groupings that I've seen, but by no means, I'm not trying to push a new typology. It kind of annoys me, sort of DSM kind of arguments about classifying people into pigeonholes. I'm just trying to look at how we could do this in terms of prevention. When there's a certain type, then we can look at intervention and prevention. The one type that I find that's really horrific is it's similar to workplace violence, but there is not an intention to commit the physical violence on the other, but it's about very much an intent to commit emotional harm. I did have a video clip, which I'm sorry I wasn't able to embed. I spent the past half hour trying to embed this video, but it's of a man in California who, Richard Farley, who was stalking and shot Laura Black and killed other employees. And he says in the interviews afterwards, he turns himself in, and then years and years later is being interviewed by Dr. Park Dietz, and he says, I never wanted to hurt her. I was going to shoot myself in front of her and have her live with the trauma of my blood and guts. And that's his phrase. That's his verbatim. He says, my blood and guts all over her. And so we see they know how horrific it is for someone to walk and discover suicide or to witness it. There's a malicious attempt. To give some examples, this is the worst case I can't even imagine. A school teacher was being harassed by her students, and it makes me think about back when I was in junior high. But having a real tough time with the students, she goes out into the playground during break, douses herself with gasoline, and she says, "This is for you," before she kills herself in front of her students, or immolates herself, or sets herself on fire. No doubt, the intent there, in my views. Again, what we all see in terms of warning signs is there was a previous breakdown. Now, if that was against, specifically, let's say she was targeting the children or the young folks, this one, I believe he was targeting the employer, and this is in Disneyland, and Disneyland's a really interesting Disney is a very interesting company, but we have a security guard. So again, when we talk about clearance and background checks and stuff like that, here we have a security guard who climbs on top of Space Mountain roller coaster and he threatens to kill himself. And he's writing on his shirt, blood, reveal the truth, SOS. And in many ways, excuse me, he was in trouble for obscene language, so certainly job performance and misconduct issues going on. But when he does this, you all know what Disney, have you ever been to Disneyland, Disney World? It's all about everything's happy and fine and super duper. And, to do this, it certainly was to, I believe, to discredit the organization. We have another comment here. The U.S. Postal Service changed their management style after discovering there was a root cause of lethal violence in the 90s. Most of the postal workers were veterans, experienced on-the-job issues with no method to have them addressed. Since this management change, lethal violence has rapidly declined. That's true. If I may say, you might be talking about the redress, mediation, or grievance procedures. While certainly they brought in a lot of EAP type of things for support of their individuals, I feel that what they really did was they had a real, immediate, personal response to grievances and problems through the redress program, and that clearly was the problem beforehand. That it was this, So thank you, sir. You mentioned that the postal system recognized the problem, especially with veterans, and they intervened with a tailored intervention that really helped address the problems right away. And you're right, you don't hear about these postal shootings anymore as much. So what can we do? And I'm talking about the emotional trauma. How can we prevent this for those who intend to commit emotional trauma in the workplace? To me, that's no difference from a workplace violence prevention, and that's you might have been to my other workshops. It's about having a good policy and procedures, good reporting, training employees about warning signs. Again, that individual acted obscenely or was inappropriate before. How is that being addressed? What sort of measures? Support measures for him, but then also disciplinary measures to also lay things down. Part of that, of course, is I'm a big fan of a sense of a sort of a threat assessment process or team of organization. And of course, it comes down to a larger issue around the environment and culture about a healthy workplace. Related to that healthy workplace is this concept of mental health support, what we could do to help folks in there. Now, related to that, I want to say with, someone intending to say, hey, I'm just going to kill myself. That's my whole plan. Now I'm going to cause a lot of trauma as I do it. There's also the factor of people who might have been planning to commit workplace violence, to shoot others, hurt others, but then they decided only to hurt themselves. So here's one case. He fires, and then the argument was made that his shots were really so random up in the air. He really didn't mean to hurt anyone. So he caused a scene there, and this really came down to the fact that he didn't hit anyone. He goes home and he calls a band member. He's in a band, and he says, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. No, I was just mad and wanted to make a statement. Again, this is one point that I want to make, that many people look at these shooters as some villain, like some sort of Marilyn Manson. Did I say Marilyn Manson? Charles Manson kind of a psychopath, and I mean that term very specifically, psychopath. And in this case, this individual was someone who was friendly. He was in a band. He was a drinking guy. He went out with his friends, and people knew he was upset at work, but he was a regular dude. And I think that's just to show you that it's not just these other people who are crazy, that it's that mental health is a much larger issue that's impacting millions of people, and a lot of people are silently suffering. And just a good example of that. Another case, guy comes in, again, to demonstrate suffering. When we talk about the gestalt of their lives, here we have someone who's diagnosed with cancer, and he realized he has very little looking forward to himself. He's demonstrated suicidal behavior at work. He goes up there this is on top of the building, and he's got a firearm. There's one factor that comes into play that I don't even know, like, technically, can you call this suicide? That if you're holding a water pistol or even a real gun, and you're surrounded by emergency response team members, and if they tell you to drop it and you raise that gun, that's suicide. That is suicide. And I know it's sometimes called suicide by cops. Some people don't like that, or that term, but that clearly is. And many people, in some of the reports, say they don't want to kill themselves because for whatever reason, religious reasons or manly reasons or whatever it might be, they determine that it's cool. I don't know. I'm not saying they think it's cool to be killed by a cop, but they choose, hey, I want to go down in battle. I don't want to commit suicide. And that's why this truly is a suicide. It's just done this way. In a case with a woman, just to demonstrate one case with a female former employee, holds people hostage. She does let them go. So it might have been very well, again, they were intending to commit this violence, but hey, why am I going to shoot this person? They did nothing wrong. They realize that, but they're just so upset there's something going on. Now, there's a huge other topic about workplace violence prevention, threat assessments, and then motivations for violence. And that's a whole other topic, but I do want to just address one model that I found that really helped me when I look at some of these cases that all of us in our lives have stress and anxiety and problems, and it's due to our experience and our the tools that we've been given and how we've used those tools, how we address it. And there's two broad ways of looking at life. You know, there's pessimism and optimism. Do you look at things optimistically or pessimistically? Another way of looking at life is you have in control internal locus of control or focus of control, and external locus of control, that things occur to you and that your life is this way because of what's been done to you, not what choices you've made. And so when we look at this, I guess ideally everyone's supposed to feel strong about themselves and can handle it, and to think that yes, they can handle it. It's all going to be fine. So when I have a problem, I got so many problems, folks, I like to think that maybe I can handle it and it's going to work out well, and that's how I become a happy, well-adjusted, self-actualized human. Now, let's go back to law enforcement officers, military, self-employed, managers. One thing I'll say about law enforcement officers that I've known and lived with is that they have a strong sense of control, of that they are masters of their own destiny. And what we see is if we have a diagnosis that's an issue or they have a problem, they say they can fix it. But if there's issues such as a severe medical diagnosis or other issues, bankruptcy, divorce, lost their children, or a literal loss of their children, someone died in their family, this depression leads to the sense of, I'm responsible, I'm the one who should be able to handle it, but I don't have any hope. This gets deeper and deeper in depression, and often in the worst case it leads to suicide. And that's where I think the dynamics that come into play, that there's no sense of hope, and also that they should have been in control. This is a little bit different dynamic when we look at people who choose to commit homicide, whereas you could believe it's everyone else's fault, like I'm getting fired because it's, you know, the greedy, you know, whatever, people in charge who are treating us unfairly. It's someone else's fault, and if I believe I can change it, I'm going to use aggression to change things. And now we're talking about use of violence for change. And by the way, if you think that's wrong, that we've been taught since 3 years old, since from every cartoon show to every movie we watch, we're told if you got a problem and you're right, you could fix it through violence. So I think that's really ingrained. I'm not even saying America. I think that's really like a universal approach. I await your feedback. The other thing, though, when we look at workplace violence, one thing I'm focusing on is there's blaming others, but they don't believe anything can be done. And what we see is there's a real time of embitterment, of this inertia that they don't do anything, which eventually I believe there is a switch. I think there is this point where they go, I've got to do something, and then they take the action. So I believe these three things, but especially this one, is where we see the source of workplace violence. And of course here is where we see the emphasis on suicide. So that was just my little rant. I hope you found that was interesting. If you look at people and look at your life and your situations, try to think about, you know, how much of it is your fault or someone else's fault? Do you think it's going to change, or do you think it's hopeless? Interesting. Finally, I think the vast majority of suicides, in my opinion, are just that they chose the location. And why this happens is often these individuals don't have anywhere else in sense to go. Let's say they don't want to commit suicide at home because they don't want their family members to find it. If they commit suicide in the woods, they don't want some poor kid walking around hiking to find their bodies. So the suicide's at work because maybe in a sense somebody could find out about it, and it could be dealt with, like it could be dealt with as a business matter. In many of these suicides, there's a note. So on the outside of their door, they'll say, hey, I committed suicide, I'm here, call the police. Or they'll send an email or a text message to someone. They're still committing the suicide, but they want people to know, and actually to minimize the trauma so the person doesn't have to be so surprised. So again, I wouldn't put these all in one category. There's all the different types. When the suicides do occur, though, at work, I believe within this category, often it is done with no witnesses and off hours. Again, this might relate to the whole managers and self-employed points because they got the key, right? Your front line employee is not going to be able to go in, but you know, when I have an office, when I go there, like I've got this extra place to go, and that's where I go. So it also comes down simply as it's a familiar place. More cases, lots of them. I guess I can read them. How are we for time? Lots of different incidents. shot himself in the head. We have cases of people coming by, visiting, saying hi to folks, hey, I'm just visiting, and then they commit suicide in a former workplace. Um, Another person kills himself at his workshop. Again, here we have a case where a man who goes to his workplace and his wife is looking for him. It might have been, I'm speculating here that he didn't want his wife finding him. She did, but he didn't want it done, at the home for whatever reasons. Okay, so golly, I could always just go through lots and lots of cases, but I think more importantly, what can we do to prevent this? When we look at it from an employer standpoint, a manager, a check writer standpoint, is what can be done through policies and procedures. And of course, it could be a component within our workplace violence policies. Another area that I want to look at is when we especially look at the depression-related issues, it really comes down to the employee assistance programs. And related to that is I wanted to add this as a separate bullet, as the work-life program, because people poo-poo like wellness programs and work-life programs. They really have a tremendous impact, and if they're done well and taken seriously, these are the sort of things that could have an impact, getting rid of those aggravating factors that impact our employees' lives. The one factor, of course, that or one organization tool that you want to look at is employee assistance programs. And again, it depends on the size of your organization, the type of organization. And I just got to say, there's no offense to anyone who runs the larger institutions, but I am a fan of the local assistance programs where you have a person either on site or in town that they could see. There's many of the phone 800 number sort of assistance programs that then refer to a local problem, but there's a value in the relationships that can be built with a local or in-house real person they could see. I take it you all know what employee assistance programs are. I'm sorry, skipping that. The one thing I want to put out there is as I've worked with a few, is questions around mandatory and voluntary referrals. And I think clearly within your policies, it may be that you want to have eligible in there mandatory referrals, which aren't necessarily punitive. EAP, when it's a mandatory referral, it's seen as a fitness for duty issue, and they're also, hey, are you trying to push me out of the organization? But if we see this as, hey, we really care, we want to help, it's really, of course, about a workforce saving solution, trying to prevent losing anyone in the workplace, but helping them out. 2 points I just want to talk about in terms of organizational workplaces is that this is getting a lot of attention in other countries, such as France had a huge issue at their, is that the telecom? It was also a huge problem at their car manufacturing plants, where we see a great number of the employees committing suicide. And of course, there could be cultural issues, there's geopolitical issues around this. The one point I want to make while we're talking about suicide at work is we do have to address the Foxconn controversy, I call it. But again, I really think this is a separate issue. This totally is a labor issue. It is not about individual cases of people with depression and how the employer can help. I'm not trying to stay out of this politically, but this really is a much larger issue about the general treatment of the employees and of the citizens in this situation. But just I need to recognize that suicide at work is seen as a very large issue because it is. You all are aware that they put suicide nets around the residences of these folks. So there's the factory, and then they have company living quarters, and around the living quarters, so many people are committing suicide, they had to hang nets around the building so people could not jump off and kill themselves. So there's your suicide prevention technique. Okay, so if it truly is work-related, if the issue is a grievance, whether it's a larger labor issue or individual such as losing a promotion or having job placement issues, is fix whatever the issues are, address the grievances now, and that's assuming that, I'm making a statement that the employer is somehow responsibility. Well, they might be, and it always takes two to tango. What can the employer do to make things better? But then recognizing that the employee themselves bring things to the table, mental health, substance abuse issues, they need to be addressed, and ideally through things such as employee assistance. But employee relations is a very important aspect. When the comment was made about the U.S. Postal System, it was really the employee relations division or department that really fixed it. That's in my opinion with that situation. So resources. Now I'm going to tell you about some great things that are out there. I don't know if I provide any help, but these people certainly know a lot more, and they could get it, and you'll get this in the email following up. Value Options, which is an EAP, has a resource, and I put the link on my Google Docs folder for it, but you could always Google it yourself. They talk about educating, training, and listing the support of supervisor management. And the real big issue is, as I mentioned, suicide has such a stigma around it that, and depression, that we need to have people realize it's okay, and that it's many people are affected by this, and it can be addressed. So it's the non-judgmental, removing the stigma, which is really key to getting people to come forward and get that help. This could be done through EAP Work Life. Also, on a mission, occupational health nurses are really significant, or could be really pivotal points in the intervention as well. Now, that's all for the outreach. Now, once there's a recognized concern, this falls into sort of the workplace violence world when we talk about the threat assessment groups. And when threat assessment teams are working, they have to recognize it's not just, hey, is this guy going to shoot us, but, will violence occur? Is there a possibility they may kill themselves? We have to consider those issues as well. Oh, maybe I should have had this slide a little earlier, but the whole point is when we're going to do things, we can do things by organizational, or what we could do directly. And by that, I just want to talk, if you're the manager, if you're the person talking to them, it does come down to a personal response. Now, I'm not saying you've got to get personally involved with their business, but especially administratively, what could be done to offer support, and then getting the support for them. The one thing I want to do, and this is not a training on suicide prevention, but I personally, professionally and personally, learned that it's fine to ask. If there's questions, if you think someone might be hurting themselves, confront them on it. Well, that's a bad word, but don't piddle around with it. Asking, are you thinking of hurting yourselves, or do you want to die? People are thinking of this. May or there's a good chance they will respond honestly. Also, there's a big fear that you're planting seeds in their head. That's one myth, that if you ask someone if they're planning to kill themselves, you're going to give them that idea. That's everyone I've ever talked to about that, or any class I've ever been to, refutes that. It's people know about it. Of course they're thinking about it, and they know that it's an option, so you're not surprising them. Going back to value options, their warning signs look at, I guess I can read this to yourselves, but along with those signs of depression, certainly you can look at substance abuse, you could look at hygiene, are they stopping to shower, sudden changes in behavior. A big warning sign is that sense of pulling away. So that refers to giving away possessions, having this, oh, hey, I'm going to take everyone out to the office and buy everyone dinner and just blow all their money, and that sounds really wonderful, but in some ways it could be a goodbye as well. Actually, I can't remember if it's in here. No, it's not in here, so I'll mention it. I know you're probably reading this slide right now, but I just want to say this is important, so please listen up, that when people are depressed, they're struggling, they're really fighting with something, and maybe the question is, do they want to kill themselves or not? And that's one of the essence of their struggle. When they've decided to kill themselves, that decision is over, and there's a peak, there's a spike in their energy, in their outlook. So suddenly it looks like things are better. It may appear that, hey, they're got a spring in their step and they're smiling and they seem to be doing better. They're probably great. They were in a funk for a while, but they seem like they're pretty chipper now. They are in a better mood because they have direction. They know what they're going to do, and they've made their decision, and they're planning to kill themselves. Not 100%, it's not always that so, but just be aware of that warning sign. And again, to me, it comes down to that direct question. Talk to them, ask them. There's other issues, things you can do, such as writing contracts and things like that, but I do suggest you get further, better training on the issues, or more importantly, get a real expert who knows what they're doing. More warning signs. I guess I could read this. Obviously, it's talking of wanting to kill themselves or things like that. But here's another warning sign I want to throw out here. Man, I got to redo this. That they will talk about the concept of suicide. The suicides that I've known, those people talk to me about others committing suicide, and they told me about books they're reading on suicide or their favorite authors or artists who committed suicide. And I never caught it then. I didn't know what they were trying to tell me, if they were trying to tell me anything at all, but they talk about it as something I found. I guess you could always, of course, read these issues. Certain substance abuse is a huge factor. I would also look at like changes in the behavior. One thing when we look at threat assessments, whether for homicide or suicide, is you're looking at a divergence from their baseline. You want to see what are they doing different than before. If you got someone who's usually pessimistic, mopey, an Eeyore type, well, okay, they've always been that way, and there's not much of a change. But if you got someone who's usually more even-keeled and changing their behavior, that's something that you wanted to display, and of course, or to be concerned about. I guess you can read these again right up there. A great organization, I think it's Society of Prevention and Resource Center. I forgot. Suicide Prevention Resource Center. That's it. And they have a booklet that's available right down here, but you'll get it in the email after this. Good old feds. The office of one of the largest employers in our country is our country, and the Office of Personnel Management has this event. You know what? I don't think I put this in the email, so at this point, maybe you want to make a note or open another tab and pull this up. Office of Personnel, Manager's Handbook, Supervising an Employee with Suicidal Concerns. Another thing. And by the way, all the things that's in there is many of the things that I discussed, but if you needed to download a bunch of resources, you can do that. The other one, of course, because it's even though culturally I know we're different around the world, but it's pretty much the same issues. People are people, and again, I want to say that other organizations, other countries have really recognized this more. And Ireland has a guide called the Guide for Employers Responding to Suicide in the Workplace. So again, there's a real chance for intervention right there. Moving on, there is the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, and they've got different task forces like faith and school and media, and one of them is the Workplace Task Force. When I contacted them, and they were sort of, it's like sort of in transition. I'm not sure exactly what specific projects, but if it's something you might be interested in or your organization, I know they would love to get real employers involved to finding out what they could do to prevent these issues. One little note that I just want to make about life in general or about the workplace. I do a lot around domestic violence at work, or I try to do, violence prevention. And now we're talking about suicide prevention. Please understand that the workplace is simply an avenue to reach adults. If you want to talk to kids, the best place is probably at school. And in some areas, the church is very influential. You can go through the churches to reach adults, to reach people. But for most adults, where we want to introduce concepts about recognizing warning signs or recognizing what an abuser looks like or learning de-escalation skills, where they're going to learn that is in the workplace. So you can see, even though you're supposed to sell widgets or make widgets or fix widgets, our lives are our lives, and we spend our waking days at the workplace, and there's opportunity there to implement these interventions to impart some skills so we could, have a better community. I'm not talking about any sort of socialist kind of approach to things, but there's things that organizations can do to provide skills to let people have a better lives. And by the way, it's not just for a better and brighter world, but it's more about like to have a healthier workplace and a healthier consumer community, because more people who are doing well in life, making money, are going to spend that money in your restaurants or buy your stuff. So I always end up preaching too much. We're near the end. The bottom line is the best way to prevent any kind of violence against self or others is having a healthy and positive workplace. And I don't know if there's any guide or anything like that you could get for that. It just comes down to just the way you live. Any questions? Again, you'll get the handouts. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate all the input. I guess I got to do my little spiel. We have more webinars coming up. You can join from click on that. What times do I click on that? What do we have coming up? Boop, boop, boo. Oh, so I'm doing one on my threat assessment tool. That'll be cool. I've almost got that finished. Hey, do you guys want to see a sneak peek? I'll show it to you real quick. This is going to be a really neat tool that I'm coming out with, and it's going to be coming out hopefully later this summer. It's to help you organize your plan. So, for instance, when you're looking at a certain subject, you're able to gather information and have this chart to put all the stats down on that, and then you can break it into action steps, who's supposed to do what, to plan things. It's just going to be a great tool to help organizations plan or how to do an assessment for prevention. So check that out. That'll be coming out soon. And then I'll go over, that's about using the tool, but this one's going to be about doing threat assessments. And then this is going to be great. Please, if you're tired of listening to me, I have an amazing woman holding her book right now, Lynn Fairweather. I went to one of her conferences, and I said, you're amazing. Come speak for me. And she agreed. So August 6th, she studies stalking in the workplace, and she does great work. And August 6th, so save the date. Finally, dun, 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 ePanic Button is brought to you by, or this webinar is brought to you by the ePanic Button. And it's pretty cool software program. You can, they're sitting there at the desk and someone's hassling you. You can mouse over this thing and click, or you can hit your keyboard, or we have foot pedals, and it sends out pop-up alerts. This pop-up goes to anyone you want in your organization, and it sends text messages and emails to whoever you want. So I'll do a little demo. Here I am doing my presentation, and then somebody comes into my office and is scaring me. I'm like, oh, I'm scared. So I mouse over, and actually I would probably hit my keys to send it off, but just to show you down here, I have my security button. I click it, and then this pops up. There's an audio alarm. All right. And then this goes to anyone I want in my organization so they know I'm in trouble and go to the balcony to come save me. So great tool. If you want it, just hit me back and say, hey, tell me more about that ePanic Button. And we'd be glad to set you up with a free trial. It's free to test out, so you're welcome to play with it if you like. I think I'm good. I think so. I think I'm going to get something to eat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's attention and time, and the fact that you joined this. Again, please join us for the one with Lynn Fairweather on August 6th, because I learned a lot from her. I bet you will too. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.